This is Working for Progress, a podcast that connects us through conversations about how we craft our working lives and make progress. We'll be joined by our communities from Tribe Porty and Keystone. Tribe Porty is a community co-working space and creative hub. We are full of entrepreneurs, social enterprises, freelancers, charities and SMEs. Keystone is the other social enterprise which supports women to reimagine their working lives. We do this by providing a holistic approach to business through courses, programs, mentoring, group coaching and events.
Welcome to today's conversation. I'm Alice, the community manager at Tribe Porty.
And I'm Dani, founder and director of both Tribe Porty and Keystone.
Here at Working for Progress, we're all about connecting good people, sharing their stories, their challenges, and the progress they make for themselves and for others. We hope this podcast challenges your ways of thinking and inspires you to work for progress.
Working for Progress starts with simple pleasures, finishes in awe, and meanders through career journeys in between. Today we welcome Emma Christie, an award-winning author. Emma writes psychological thrillers set in Portobello, and when she's not writing, she's travelling in her campervan or living in Barcelona with her girlfriend Mari and far too many plants. Welcome, Emma.
Lovely, happy to be here.
Good. We'll start out nice and simple. Tell us about your 5 most simple pleasures.
Wow. I would say coffee is definitely the first one. That's the first thing I do when I get up every day is make a brew. I'm actually really into coffee as well. I'm a bit of a coffee snob. So that would definitely be top of my list. Campervanning. I'm just back from a 6-month trip across Europe and the Balkans. I was writing every day in the van, but just waking up in the campervan is for me one of the best parts of my life. I just absolutely love it, whether we're in the mountains or the sea or whatever. I just love it. Running, I know, and some people will be like, what? It's the worst thing ever, but I've always been a runner, and for me it's just such a great way just to sort of, if I'm stressed, if I'm tired, if I'm whatever feeling I have, running always helps. I don't know, I always say, you know, I never regret it when I go for a run, even though I have to sort of go out in the rain and the wind or whatever. It's definitely for me a huge part of my life that I just absolutely love. Walnuts.
That's a first.
I've become slightly obsessed with walnuts as well, so I'd never had a walnut until I met my girlfriend. So I've been with her for 9 years now, and I remember when I first went to her house, she had this little box of walnuts, and I was like, I've only ever seen these painted gold in a Christmas decoration. Like, I've never eaten one, and I don't think I like them, but anyway, she opened them and I tried one and I thought, wow, actually it's really nice. And I've since sort of made it my life mission to like find the best walnuts in Barcelona. So I go around all the different markets and I buy lots of different samples, and then I do like tasters sessions. I mean, I'm such a geek, but
I love it.
I love them, and especially with my first coffee of the day.
Plain walnuts?
Yeah, just plain walnuts. Yeah.
I saw something recently, an art piece. I think they were cut. I don't know, but they were really beautiful, these walnuts. I must find it. Tell us the nutritional properties of a walnut.
Well, apparently, you know how they look like brains?
Yeah.
Apparently they're good for your brain as well. I don't know, but there's a really great book called Braiding Sweetgrass. Yeah. I don't know if you've read it, but she talks about nuts just being, you know, containing the whole of life in them, you know, because it's the seed of a tree. And so, like, I really love to think about that when I eat them. I sort of give thanks, and also just the amount of energy and sort of power that's in a single walnut. It can sound a bit ridiculous, but I really love them. Yeah. I think that's 4. Another one would be a bit of a guilty pleasure. I just love crisps, like, and I try not to eat too many. I try to keep it as like a treat.
Yeah.
But at the end of like a hike, or like, I live in Spain most of the time, so like when it's slightly hot weather, you've been out for a hike or a run or something, and come back, and a wee like cold drink and a crisp. There's nothing better.
More than one crisp, I take it.
Yeah. I eat them individually, so my girlfriend and I, she like grabs a whole handful and stuffs them in, and I'm like really particular, and I have one at a time, and I take the flavour off it and then savour it. But we have to have a bowl each, because otherwise they just disappear. So
This is saying so much about you without saying
Oh
very
my
much at all. I'm
know.
not sure what yet.
Yeah, Virgo,
I'll
as we're
ponder it
saying.
more.
Yeah.
Great. I'd love to hear about the values that you live by, and maybe how that is reflected in what you're doing now in terms of your working life.
Interesting question. I think I kind of try to, like, I'm very, very into meditation, and I think what meditation, it's taught me many, many things, but I think one of the things that meditation has really taught me is to listen to my body. And so I'd say, I mean, I don't know if that's a value or not, but I always try to listen to my body before I make decisions. It can be about whether or not I'm going to have that second walnut, or it can be like if I'm in a situation where I know I don't feel comfortable, and my mind is saying just keep going, but actually if I don't feel comfortable, be able to sort of step back. And also in terms of reactions to people, if someone's in a really bad mood and your mind is like, just go and tell them to like go stuff themselves, and actually my body's maybe saying something else, like what's wrong with this person, and feeling bad for them, So I suppose, maybe that is a value, listening to my body and trying to really sort of gauge what I truly feel about things and override my brain a lot of the time. And I think another value, I suppose, I'm just very, very, I sort of very much believe in giving everything to the moment that you're in. I think we spend half our lives either thinking about the past or thinking about the future, and you can kind of get lost in what you're actually doing. So I mean, again, that kind of comes from meditation practice, but I think so often we put things off, and in my case, I worked as a journalist for 5 or 6 years, but I knew that I wanted to be a writer. But it was always the case that I would say, well, I'll wait until I've been promoted so that I've got more money, or I'll wait until this happens, or wait until this happens. I'll try and write it in the mornings before work. I was just kind of putting it off. And I think there comes a point where you just have to put your passions first and really allow yourself to take your passions seriously, which is not always easy because, there's, as well as the voice in your own brain saying, don't be ridiculous, this is a waste of your time. There's the society's also kind of saying that. So I think it takes a lot of perseverance and dedication, to really follow these things through. And also, and again, I'm not sure this is a value, but like how you view success as well is, I think my definition of success has really changed over the years, since school, when it was, okay, I'm getting great marks, I'm top of the class, go to university, and I started failing exams, and that never happened before. And I really struggled with it because for me, success was academic success. And then once I got into the job market, it was the same kind of thing. I want to be promoted, I want to earn more money. And that, it's just kind of all fallen away a wee bit when I decided to, quit my job and try and become a writer. And then basically had 10 years of rejections and failure. Literally, I wrote 2.5 books that were just, rejected by everyone. And I did ask myself, what am I doing? I'm just sort of setting myself up for failure, and I'm not earning much money. All my friends have now got houses and cars and all these things and big jobs. But I think ultimately what I did in those 10 years of rejections was create the lifestyle that I wanted, and I realised that was actually the best success ever. I reduced stress massively. I was just created a life where I had time for everything that I wanted to do. I do have quite an intense lifestyle in that I rarely sit down. I don't have a TV. I've never had a TV. I don't sit down very often, but I don't feel stressed. So I sort of have a lot of things on always, but I enjoy all of them, and I'm choosing to do all of them. So I suppose, sort of designing the lifestyle that you want for me is more important than the sort of classic definition of success. So that's maybe kind of...
No, I love it. There's so much there. First, I want to ask about how you honed your kind of listening to what your body or your somatic messages or sending out? How did you trust that was worth listening to and giving attention to? And because you have to develop that skill, I think. So do you know where that came from, or slow over time? But
I think, I mean, I started, it definitely all came from the moment I started to meditate, and I'd never been drawn to meditation really. I moved to a little village in Spain, and I didn't know anyone, and I saw a poster for meditation class. I thought, I'll go and meet some people who, you know, will be welcoming. I think I sort of assumed it would be quite a welcoming community, and it was. And to my great surprise, I totally loved it. And I would go home and I would have this big smile, and my girlfriend at the time was like, "This your Zen smile," you know. And it all felt a bit strange because I really hadn't been into that kind of thing at all before. But I'd probably been meditating for a couple of years really before I really started feeling the benefits of it and really started sort of believing in it. And I think it's just that time. Just at that time I was drinking quite a lot. I mean, I still, you know, love a wee beer and a glass of wine, but I was still at that age where I was probably drinking more than I well, I don't like to say should, but I was drinking more than I was comfortable with probably. And during the meditation, I started to notice my body doesn't feel good. And then I also started to notice that sometimes when I was out at the pub and I was saying, okay, I'll have another one, I didn't actually want to. And I was just falling into this sort of habit of drinking. So it's strange because I've always been very sporty and really, really sort of valued my exercise, but I've also been quite a big party person as well. So it'd always been one thing compensated for the other. I would be like, yeah, I can go out drinking because tomorrow I'm playing football or I'm going for a run. But I started to realise that actually I didn't always want to. I didn't want to wake up and feel like that every day and have the cloudy head, and I didn't actually need or want to be drinking as much. And that was kind of the first step, and that was a big realisation for me, because I think being Scottish, you know, we do drink a lot, you know, and it's always been part of my lifestyle really. And so that was quite significant for me, really, sort of taking a wee step back from that, and I thought, wow, what else is my body trying to tell me that I've not been listening to, you know? And I just started, I suppose it just made me little by little sort of just be more aware of thoughts that came into my head that usually I would just sort of, I call them red flags, you know, things would sort of say, you know, you're not comfortable doing this, or do you really want to be doing this? And I would say, yeah, it's fine, you know, but actually I didn't, you know, and part of that ended with, you know, I broke up a relationship that I'd been in for a long time. There's just lots of things sort of I suddenly started to see with much more clarity. And like physically, I when I was in my 20s, I suffered from panic attacks, and I was like terrified of my heartbeat. But strangely, when I started doing meditation, I really connected with my heartbeat again. And now I actually find it really comforting. So if I'm in a situation where I'm a bit nervous or doing a performance or something, I quite often will just, you know, put my hands together, and once I can feel my heartbeat, it calms me down. So in a very sort of physical way, connecting with my body has been helpful, but also I think just when I'm really focusing on my body, I'm also seeing the thoughts that are recurring and actually paying attention to them. And I think, well, I suppose meditation is, at its core, is learning to pay attention. And I think that took a long time, but I'm getting there, and I'm, you know, still working on it, you know.
Well, did it take a long time? I think you're far ahead of a lot of people, I think. And in terms of your carving out your own version or your own definition of success, is that part of that, kind of being more aware of yourself and how you're feeling? And was there a moment that you're like, actually, I'm deciding what I want and this is what I want, as opposed to, because we're all kind of driven by our cultural messages and what other people think we should be doing, and sometimes that's really hard to separate out and like feel confident in your own choices that maybe some other people won't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole process of getting a book published and having so many years of rejections from publishers, it did make me, well, I struggled with it a lot, because I thought, you know, I'm never I'm never going to get published, and does that mean that I'm not a success, basically, you know? I sort of very much associated getting published with being a success. But then, I don't know, I mean, it's not something that I'm totally over, because, you know, once I did get published, you know, which was, strangely, it was 10 years to the day after I quit my job. Okay. Wow. It was very, very strange. I got a message from my agent saying, you know, we've finally got a deal for your book. And then, of course, when you reach that point, you're like, oh, okay, what now? You know, and immediately the goalposts shift. And I always had said, I don't care how many copies I sell. As soon as I get published, you know, that's my dream come true. But I think anyone who sort of achieves a lifetime goal and reaches that success and realises, all right, so now there's just a different goal to achieve. Yeah. You know, and my first book did really well, so then there was pressure on me for the second book. And, you know, it's very easy to fall into that sort of just constant striving. And I, you know, I do at times. I just think, you know, will this book be as sell as many as the other one? Will it win a prize or anything? And but I think I always try and just come back to the sort of reality of my day to day, which is, you know, I love my life that I have, and if I sell 20,000 copies as opposed to 10,000 copies, what difference will that actually make, other than I can tell people, you know? So it's a funny one, you know, how we define success. My meditation teacher in Barcelona, he talks quite a lot about this, and he says, you know, so many of us look to the outside for applause and for to try and find this sort of light within ourselves. And he's like, but actually the light needs to come from, you know, from inside of yourself. And you can't, you know, if you're always relying on applause in some form or another, then, you know, when it doesn't come, you're going to feel terrible. And so it's about trying to sort of rewire your brain a bit to realise that actually, you know, you need to believe it yourself, basically, which is way easier said than done,
isn't it?
You know. So I don't know, I see all of this kind of stuff as a lifelong practice. I don't think it's something that you get to a point and you say, okay, now I'm sorted and now I'm never going to compare myself to other people. Yeah. You know, but I think the great thing about doing meditation every day is that I sort of have those moments of remembering, actually everything is okay. and actually this thing doesn't really matter. So yeah, I think it's what is success and what success means is something I think that shifts constantly, and it's just trying to stay, just sort of remain aware of all the good stuff that is right here, I suppose, and not projecting your happiness into a future point.
That's good. I mean, most people probably look at you and think, oh, great, young writer, she's published 3 amazing award-winning books, she's made it, and you're like, well, actually 10 years, it took me 10 years before I got that call. And then, like you say, it just changes, doesn't it, that kind of version of your next success, or whatever you're striving for, as long as it's coming from yourself. On that note, whether it's in those 10 years or not, but I'd love to hear about the kind of most random or worst job you've ever done.
I've done so many different jobs. The dullest job I would say I've ever done was stock taking in a B&Q warehouse. And literally I had to count screws and nails. And like thousands of them, and just tick them off a list. That was pretty dull. I also sold water coolers at one point, which was it was actually quite good because the company gave a free trial to businesses and individuals, so all of my friends had these really fancy water coolers in their house. So like for the first week I was like, wow, she's so great at sales, and I was like, yeah,
I've exhausted my
I've
friend
run out
list.
of friends. Quickly left that job. I've done lots and lots of different jobs, actually. I mean, one of the things that kept me going, or the thing that really kept me going through the many years of rejections, was tour guiding. And I still do that. I've been tour guiding for 20 years in Spain and France and Portugal. And I really love that job. It's the opposite of writing in many ways, because I have to be completely sociable and with people 24 hours a day. I go on sort of 2-week trips with them. So that's a brilliant job. And again, it's one of these jobs that I didn't know it existed. I didn't, when you're at school and they say, okay, you can be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. Like, no one says, why don't you become a tour director and travel across Europe with wealthy Americans?
That sounds amazing.
And it's like, actually, yeah, it sounds great. So it's a very intense job as well, and people either love it or hate it, but I really do love it, and I get to meet amazing people on that job as well. So, and
you're a bit of a history buff, aren't you?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So I studied medieval history at uni, and I just have always loved history, and I read a lot of non-fiction books, and I travel a lot, and I'm always intrigued as to how things connect. The thing I love about history is you learn about the Industrial Revolution or something, and then you zoom out and go, well, what was happening at that point in the Americas, and what was happening in Russia, and somehow then you can link it all together. And I just find it so amazing the way that all these different movements in different places influence each other, and how they influence the present as well. So I really love the sort of storytelling part of tour guiding, and diving into the history of that as well, which is great. And maybe in the future with my books, I would go with a more historical time period, perhaps, to sort of combine all of my passions in one.
That sounds great.
Yeah, who knows.
I'm just thinking you make a perfect tour guide, like be able to story tell plus know a bit of history, enthusiastic about traveling. Yeah, sounds good to me. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken in your work or your working life?
Biggest risk, probably quitting my job. When I was a news reporter, I'd just been promoted to chief reporter, so I had a team, I had a business card, I had a little bit more money, I had a car, and the paper was actually selling really well. With the Press and Journal, each area has its own edition, and our edition for the Murray area, I was up in the Elgin office, was increasing sales. So it was like, wow, this is amazing. It's all going so well. But I remember just thinking, okay, so if I stay at the paper, where am I going to go? And my boss was already saying, if you're if you're chief reporter for a couple of years, then we can bring you back to Aberdeen and maybe be a news editor, which is an office-based job. And I just thought, I can't see myself doing any of that, and people, who are news editors or editors, have great passion for their work, and it's a hugely important job within the newspapers, but I just didn't see myself in any of those seats. And so I thought, well, what do I do then? If I don't see myself here, then where do I go? And I had saved a few £1,000. I'd saved maybe, I don't know, £3,000 or £4,000, and I just thought, I think I need to just take 1 year and see if I can actually write a book. I literally had never tried to write a book. I wasn't in a writing club. I knew no writers. I had no idea. All I had was this woman in my head who I just had a question about her that I just wanted desperately to answer. And the only way I could think about doing it was trying to write it down. It was really strange the way that her name is Ruth Morrison. She's the protagonist of my first book. She just appeared, and I suppose just the risk I took was betting on her rather than a more stable career, And I did think it would be 1 year. That was initially the plan, was I'm going to take 1 year. And then that turned into 1.5 years, and then that turned into 3 years, and never went back. So it was a risk, but at the same time, I knew, even then I think I knew it was the right thing to do, because I loved being a journalist, but I could sense that was changing, and I thought, I don't want to start hating this job. And so sort of leave while you're ahead,
That takes a lot of character, I think, yeah. So where does your love for psychological thrillers or crime come from, writing about those things? When
I first started writing, I didn't think that's what I was writing at all. I had envisaged some literary novel that would, be up for the Booker Prize and such like, and really, really did not think I was writing crime at all. I mean, there was a missing person and there was a sort of hunt for the missing person, but I saw it as much more, I don't know, I hadn't really thought about how to define it, to be honest, but I had very fancy chapter headings, and lots of metaphors, which I thought was would made it literary. And it was my agent who said, chop this down, get rid of all these metaphors, and what you've got is a classic crime novel. Wow. And I was like, really? But it's funny because actually it's quite logical. And when I was working as a news reporter, I was dealing with crimes all the time. Latterly in Elgin, I was the court reporter. I spent a lot of time in court, and also out on stories where there was murders or whatever. And it did really impact me, and that was another reason why I stopped being a journalist as well, because I found it was just emotionally quite a challenging job, and I think a lot of people who have been journalists for a long time, turn to humour and they sort of harden to it. But I just found it all quite distressing at times. You just see how easily someone's life can completely turn upside down, whether they've committed a crime or whether they've been victim of a crime. It totally blew my mind, to be honest, the first few times I went to court, and you've just got this trail of people going in, and one person, just even losing your driver's license, and then you suddenly lose your job, you lose your house, you lose everything, or someone just making a really bad decision when they're drunk and suddenly they're in jail for murder or whatever. And I just find it fascinating how quickly life can change, I suppose. And when you're a news reporter, we have quite sort of privileged access, I suppose, to lots of different lives, of all different backgrounds, and those are the kind of characters that I try to write about as well, just ordinary people. A lot of crime thrillers are more focused on the actual police process, or you have a lot of destination thrillers these days set in the Maldives and such like, and I don't know, I have a great affinity just with the sort of ordinary working man or working woman, and the extraordinary things that can happen to everyone, really, and your neighbour or anyone you see on the street.
Yeah. And that's just part of your creative process, as something comes to you and you just get stuck in.
Yeah.
How long did it take to write your first novel?
The first one, I think, the first draft probably took about a year and a half. I had literally no idea what I was doing. Pegged it all together. And I was really lucky though in that I got picked up by an agent almost immediately, which was amazing, because I think there's something like a 0.005% chance of getting an agent. The statistics are horrendous. But and I thought, that's it, I've made it. And then followed 8 years of being rejected. But she stuck with me, and that was actually such an important part of it as well, to have someone in the industry who believed that success would come, publication would come, and she helped me so much. So I mean, I'm not a very fast writer. Some people are able to write 2 books a year, or at least like 1 a year, as a matter of course. But for me, my process is quite messy. I don't plan. A character will appear, and I kind of think, okay. And I usually have maybe one scene with them that is obviously the key moment, but I'm not really aware of what's going on, and so I just kind of have to write around that scene, and it's often the ending of the book, and so then I have to sort of work my way back and work out what on earth has brought them to this position. So it's pretty chaotic, my process, but it's just I've tried to work in different ways, and I can't. So
that's you.
Yeah. And
the second book take as long?
The second book took even longer. In fact, yeah. So the second book was my goodness, I wrote 90,000 words. I wrote that during COVID.
Okay.
I wrote 90,000 words. I was on deadline, and about 3 days before I was due to hand it in, I called my agent and I said, "This book is not the book I wanted to write. It's just the wrong book." She was like, okay, you're probably just stressed, you're probably just paranoid. I was like, no, I'm not going to hand it in. I'm going to put it away. I'm going to put it in the bin. And I did. And I mean, it was 90,000 words, and it was probably okay, but it wasn't the book that I wanted to write. And so I spoke to my editor as well, and she said to me, is there anything in this book, before you throw it away, is there anything in it? Is there a single scene, a single conversation that you would want to maintain? And that was such an important comment for me, because there was one scene in it that had been the first scene that had come to me all those months before, and I had just written it the wrong way. I'd arrived at that scene in a way that I just wasn't happy with, and so I went back to that first scene and rewrote it from there. Completely different. I mean, it's a completely different book, and that was it was quite traumatic, to be honest. It was a really difficult decision to make, and my publisher thankfully gave me an extra year to write it, but it was also just so interesting to think how different, I don't know, the different way that my mind worked the second time around, and it was the same characters and the same scene, but they arrived there in a completely different way. I mean, just the creative process is just baffling.
I'm baffled that you had the strength to stick with what you felt inside to be right for what you wanted.
Maybe that's the biggest risk I ever took. I was throwing that one away,
That's huge.
But yeah, and the third one, I didn't throw away quite so many words, but I got writer's block, which is, until last year I didn't really believe it existed. But I got to 45,000 words, which is about halfway through a novel, and I just got stuck, and I just couldn't see how the story could develop any further. And I actually handed it in, and they were like, well, it's very short. And there's an awful lot of focus on this dog, and I'm like, yeah. And I just couldn't get past it. It never happened, and I sort of got into a panic a wee bit. I was trying to just sort of be very zen, and it'll come, but then it didn't come, and it didn't come, and it didn't come. And then actually what happened, really randomly, I got approached via my website by a scriptwriter for the BBC who was running some live shows in Edinburgh, and he was looking for people to write monologues for the show, and it was called Queer Folks' Tales. And he said, would you like to be part of it? And I was like, well, I've never done stage, and I've never written a monologue, but I'm kind of stuck with my book, so yeah, I'm gonna do it. And it was honestly one of the most key moments. Well, I would say it was the key moment actually in the development of the third book, because by committing myself to a completely different kind of writing, it just seemed to unlock something in my brain a bit. And I think when you're on the stage and when you're writing for the stage, you have to really connect to the feeling, I think, as well. There's no room for writing around the feeling. It was a 10-minute monologue. I had to get to the point, and I had to try and make that impact really quickly. And so somehow it just reminded me of how to do that, in the book as well, and just remembering always to think about the way I wanted the reader to feel. In the theatre, I wanted, it's a very obvious, it's an immediate reaction you get. With a reader, you never know how people read your books, but in the theatre, they laugh or they cry or they ooh or whatever. And it was really interesting to write in that way, and then sort of apply those same techniques, I suppose, to my book, and it just completely unlocked this terrible block that I'd had. So it was a massively important part of the process.
It's a good takeaway when we get those stuck places. Changing your perspective quite often is doing something completely new. Yeah. Because then it's like plasticity of your brain. Then
absolutely,
changes. Yeah. I love it. Can you tell us the last time that you experienced awe, or you experienced a state of flow?
Probably actually last week when I was on stage in the theatre for the Queer Folks' Tales. I went back and did it again this year, and that was definitely, it was funny going back to do it again I actually felt more nervous the second time. I think because when I went to do it the first time, it was something completely new. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know the theatre was going to be packed. I just remembered how I felt after it, and I'd enjoyed it. But I was really nervous this time. And I think, again, it was that sort of expectation. They've asked me back again because they thought I was good, and now I'm going to disappoint. But, you know, I just that week, actually, I was listening to a podcast by my meditation teacher, and he was talking about how when you're performing or when you're at an event, then the energy that you create is much more important than the form. You know, you can have everything completely brilliantly organised, and you know, all the words are exactly as you want them, but if you're not living that experience, if you're not really feeling it, then, you know, it can fall quite flat. And so I really tried to keep that in mind when I was on the stage, and just not, you know, just really be in the moment. And so, I mean, it was definitely a sort of state of flow, and you know, the audience you know, was right there and responded in a really great way to that, because I think because I was feeling it, I think they could feel it as well. And I think that's another thing that meditation has taught me is that sort of really perceptible energy, which, I mean, I'm like, always, every time I use the word energy, I sound like I feel like, oh, I'm being a total hippie. And it always sounds better in Spanish. But, you know, it's you know, whether it's like you're walking into a cafe and you think, I like this place, or I don't like this place, and you can't quite place it. I think that is due to the energy that's been given out by someone. If someone's in a bad mood, you can feel it, you know. Everyone knows that. If you walk into a room and someone's in an argument, you're like, And it's the same with good feeling, I think, you know. So trying to sort of create that on the stage, and create that sort of wavelength, you know. It's almost like you're turning the dial on the radio, and then it suddenly goes into the right one, and it just kind of flows, which is...
So did you enjoy it even more this time, or...?
Yeah, do you know, it was very different, again, because the stories I was telling were really different, but it was equally as inspiring. It really was. You know, it was so amazing to be part of it, but also to be, you know, to experience the other people's stories as well, and especially the guy who runs it is just such a great storyteller, and he's able to, you know, be really funny, and then really moving, and then really inspiring, and then, you know, an activist, all within a minute, you know. Wow. it's fantastic to watch that kind of performer as well, you know. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. So what now? What's next for you in terms of, you're obviously promoting your new book now, and do you have a kind of 5-year plan, or how do you live your life?
At the moment, I'm working on the 4th book, so I've got a contract for one more book with my publisher. I'm about halfway through. And actually, since I came back from my big van trip, you know, last year I was away for 6 months, and I worked every single morning in the van. So I would work maybe 3.5 hours every day, and then the rest of the day would be spent adventuring, you know, and exploring. And it's been amazing, actually. I've been trying to apply that same routine to my life back home. And so what I found is I'm working much more efficiently, but also I just have room for lots of stuff in the afternoons that I never used to have room for, because I used to just work all day. So in terms of what's next, I don't know. I'm just enjoying having a bit more time to just explore different things, you know, like I run an online book festival, so I did that in January, and that was great. I've been looking into maybe organising some sort of retreat with my girlfriend. She's a yoga teacher, so that's sort of there, sort of floating as an idea. Also got more van trips planned as well. But basically keep writing. I do have an idea for a historical novel potentially, and that would be something completely different. And again, that would be a bit of a risk, because I'm just sort of beginning to establish myself as a crime writer, and so if I suddenly go off and do something else, then it could be a bit risky. But at the same time, I think, you know, when I first started writing, I wasn't writing for an audience. I didn't think that this Ruth Morrison who came into my head, I wasn't thinking, will people like her, will they not like her? I just wrote it because that's who kept coming into my head. Sure. And the same thing is happening with this historical novel. I'm just having this sort of constant flow of thoughts that, you know, just saying, maybe you should take a few hours to explore this a bit more, and I'm sort of seeing signs everywhere about it, as if it's calling to me,
sounds like it.
So I don't know, I mean, that would be I would need to take time out to do that, because with historical, it needs a lot of research and such like, but basically just keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, I feel immensely blessed that actually the lifestyle I have is pretty much exactly the lifestyle that I want to have, and it's going forward. I just hope I can maintain it, really.
Yeah, I don't think you need hope. I feel like you've done a good job at cracking, listening to yourself, and excited to see what happens next.
Thank you.
Personally.
Yeah, we do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To hear more about Tribe Porty and Keystone, you can find us on all social media platforms. Please head over to our website and subscribe to our newsletters, which includes monthly blogs to provide helpful insights into how we craft our working lives. This has been Working for Progress. We hope you join us again.